Thanksgivings.
Oh, yeah.
And that's our next door neighbor, Priscilla. And I picked this because it was a great picture. And like I said, he grumbled a lot, but he just loved, having people gather.
So good.
Now we're going to go way back in time.
Oh my God.
Obviously, this was before I knew him. And I have a funny feeling that this was
Joseph, that was
Probably-
before electricity.
probably the last time that he was actually on a bicycle.
That's
In his youth, and really all his life, but especially in his youth, he was a huge Frank Sinatra fan.
Really?
And he and his sister Louise used to go into Boston to the Paramount Theater because in those days, Frank Sinatra and other entertainers would go around and in between double features, they would put on a stage show. And if you've ever seen those old newsreels of the Bobby Sockers storming the theaters when Frank Sinatra appeared, well, he got Louise to take him into Boston so that they could go and see Frank Sinatra. And he remained a Frank Sinatra fan all his life. I found a huge, well, not a huge, but I found a trove of Frank Sinatra fan stuff in his papers. By the way, he saved everything. So if you ever sent him a letter or a card and you want it back, let me know because I've got it here. In 1954, he went to Europe. Again, he went with his sister Louise. And let's see, he was born in 1927. So if he went in 54, he was what, 33 years old? He kept this diary, which if I could read his handwriting, it takes me a long time, but he detailed everything that happened on this trip. And there were also a few things that happened on the trip that he told me about that I don't believe are in the diary. So the diary is family safe.
Okay.
The stories
Joseph?
he told me are not.
Joseph,
Yes.
can I say something?
Yes, Barbara.
That trip to Europe was with me and two of my college classmates.
Okay, and I thank you.
She's got all the secrets.
No, I don't.
But this was his passport for that trip.
Yeah.
And what I loved about it was on the passport under occupation, he had artist.
Yes.
I love that.
nice.
What was it?
Artist.
Oh my
And
goodness.
This is
Wow.
him
Yeah.
again, long before I knew him, long before he had a beard, which I'm responsible for. This was when he was teaching, and I don't know where. I suspect it was either at the University of Hartford or it could have possibly been in New Jersey.
Okay.
is-
Joseph?
Yep.
One thing else. He taught at Framingham State College for a short time.
Yeah, I found the letter about him going to teach there,
Yeah.
but I didn't know that he had ever accepted the offer because I had never heard him mention that, but I did find the letter from Framingham State where somebody had recommended him to teach.
Yeah.
But doesn't he look like Federico Fellini? He looks like an Italian film director. He also worked as a potter at Old Sturbridge Village, and I found the acceptance letter for that. We and some of his family members have a number of pieces of pottery he made while he was there. The acceptance letter outlined that it would be a good experience for him and well worth the fact that they were going to pay him $1.50 an hour.
Ooh.
Wow.
50 an hour.
Well,
He
that's all right.
often told me how much he loved living in Boston. And I believe this would have been around, I don't know if this was when he was at Mass College of Art, but it was at, I believe, 28 Anderson Street. And he must have really loved it because one of the things I found among his things were the set of keys to the apartment. So apparently the landlord didn't charge a key deposit because he kept those keys as a memento. This is a recent photo. The building is still there. Barbara, do you know what floor he lived on?
No, I don't.
But I know he would often talk about it. It was in the Back Bay, and he absolutely loved living in Boston before I took him to Maine. He did used to smoke,
Yes, I remember.
He used to-
but he eventually did give it up. And this is him with one of his first dogs. So this would have either been Star or Velvet.
Right.
Again, before I knew him.
Ooh, I like
He
that.
was an artist. So this is one of his paintings still in the house. And his paintings, he was very much part of the abstract expressionist movement in the 1950s and 60s. This is a very large painting. It's about 4 by 5 feet.
Wow.
Another one that's in the front hall.
Aw.
Very nice.
And he kept up with art.
I love this photo so much.
This photo actually wound up on the Worcester magazine.
Yes, it did.
Wow.
Wow.
He was very focused on his drawing. And this is when I came along long before this picture. I actually had a lot less weight and dark hair. And at that time, he didn't have a beard. I actually met him in 1974. Now, he didn't quite remember it. I first saw him when I went to an open house day they were having at the college for prospective students. So it was before I was even enrolled. Now, he remembers things differently. He claims he first noticed me walking up the stairs of the campus center, but that can't be true because when I saw him for the first time, he was sitting at a table doing a demonstration of some sort. And as somebody else has noted, he wore a lot of jewelry. And I remember coming home and making the comment that I met somebody at this open house and he had so much jewelry on, he looked like he was chained to the table. But I knew from the first time I saw him, this is going to be the one.
Oh.
It took me a couple of years, but I was right. And he always wore lots of jewelry. And this is one of his treasured bracelets that his nieces sent him a few years ago for his birthday. As you can imagine, the dog symbol. This is his sister Louise, and I have to include her because
Louise.
from the first that I knew him, it seemed like Louise was always with him. Now, I felt sort of guilty because Louise was such a hard worker. She would come up, and it's rare to get a picture of her sitting in a chair. We would be sitting on the patio drinking martinis, and she's running around the backyard with a wheelbarrow, digging up the garden and digging up the weeds. And, you know, it's like, you know, well, we're going to make another picture of martinis. And, you know, but she was a huge part of both his and my life. In her heyday, it was amazing. We'd go out to lunch with her or out to dinner. And she wasn't a huge person, and she could demolish the large size prime rib. So she was always included. Many times I was delegated to go down to Milford, drive her up to Northborough for the day where we could put her to work either doing laundry, ironing, or working in the garden. It was cheaper than hiring somebody.
Feed her a prime rib.
Once I came along, one big change that happened was that we wound up going to Maine a lot and buying a couple of houses in Maine. Now, this might not seem like a big deal, but for those of you who have known Ralph a long time, when I first met him, I think if he needed a light bulb changed, he would have called an electrician. He was not a handy person. He did not do housework, you know, of handyman sort. So this was a big change. And I've got to say, the people that have been his tradespeople all loved him. One thing that he did when one of them came to install the space heater in the basement, he gave them a bottle of wine. And then years later, when they came back to fix it, they remembered this. So this is a good thing. Be really good to the tradespeople because they will remember it. And when you call for help, they're going to come running right away because they know you are a good person. So this was a major project for us. And it's one of the first big things that we did together, working on the house. Now, granted, most of what he did consisted of doing the cleanup and carrying the tools. And also, he would go out and stand on the sidewalk while I was up on the ladders, so that if I fell, he would be the one to call 911. And for those of you who knew the way he liked to live, can you imagine him spending a summer like this?
No.
And of course, as you all know, insane dog person. This is one of his dogs. I think this is Clayton.
Yes.
And he
Clayton.
always had black standard poodles. And then one day at work, somebody came to my office and said, I have a dog and my wife doesn't like the dog and I need to find a new home. And first of all, it was a male, which he never wanted a male dog. And the reason for that was practical. He always felt, as do I, that if you have a female dog, if they have an accident in the house, you only have to clean up the floor. If you have a male dog, you have to clean up the wall and the floor. So he didn't want small dogs. He didn't want a dog that wasn't a poodle. He didn't want a male dog. When I brought that Westie home, Chrissy, he fell in love with it. And then after Chrissy went, he decided he wanted another West Highland Terrier. So I believe this is Clayton. And Clayton was
Yeah.
one of the loves of his life, aside from me. These are some of the later dogs when the house was actually more inhabitable. So our main activity when we were in Maine would be to sit out on the deck with the dogs and martinis and just inviting guests over, always having company to come over for a drink and have a good time.
Nice.
And there he is with, I believe this is Savannah and Lily. Like I said, he spoiled these dogs rotten, which explains why they're so hard to discipline now that I'm in charge of them. One of his gifts was a pillowcase.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And oddly enough, it wasn't made from a photo of his dogs. It just happened to be available for sale. And I said, boy, that looks just like one of his dogs. That was one of his favorite items. He absolutely loved going out to eat.
Yes.
And I asked him one time, I said, why do you like going out to restaurants so much? And he said, well,
Back to you.
you go in, they bring you the food, they serve you the food. When you're done, they take the dishes away. You don't have to do anything. And I said, well, you're sort of describing the service you get at home. This was one of the last times due to COVID that we were actually able to go